This is Mark from Analysis Prime University, and in this tutorial, we will talk about the toolbar options that you find when you're in the Files section of SAP Analytics Cloud. First, we will go to our Files repository by going to our navigation bar and clicking on Files. And in here, we are focused on this toolbar that my mouse is hovering over right now. This toolbar is unique to the Files section of SAC. Most applications within SAC have their own dedicated toolbar, and this is no exception to that. So we're just going to go down the list of the toolbar options and talk about what they do. The first one here is called Create, and if I click on that, I'll see a drop-down of all these different objects that I have access to create within SAC. If I click on one of these, it's going to take me to the application landing page, just like if I were to go to the navigation bar and click on the same application. From here, I could create a new story, for example. I'm going to collapse my navigation bar and go back with the back button, back to my file repository. The next button is Folder Actions, and from here, I can choose to create a new folder, or I can have other objects selected with the checkboxes over here, and I can move objects within the folder structure of my environment. Now, you might notice that Move To is grayed out, and in fact, the next few options are also grayed out in our toolbar. These options require us to have something selected with a checkbox here in our file repository. Now that I've selected this new folder here, my Move To action is available, as well as the next several items. The next one is Edit Details. If I click on this, it's going to open up the properties of whatever object I have selected. In this case, it's very simple. It's a folder, so it has a name and a description. The next icon is Share. And this is where we can go to open up the Share folder window in this case, or a Share object window for whatever object or file you might have selected. I can review the existing sharing settings if there were any, or I can provide them from scratch in this case because this folder is not currently shared. I add users or teams in here and provide their access level. The next icon is called Copy To, and this simply copies whatever object or folder I have selected, and I will then be allowed to choose its destination. Next up down the line here is Delete. If I wanted to delete this folder, I would click on Delete. It will confirm that I want to do so. And the next item is pretty important. This one is called Change Owner. If I click Change Owner for any object, what it's going to do is it's going to allow us to change the designated owner in this column of our file repository. Now, by default, the owner is going to be whatever user created an object for the very first time, but that might need to change as certain situations deem necessary. So if I want to change the owner of new folder here, I have it selected and I can click on Change Owner. And it will allow me to choose a different user from my tenant and assign them as the new owner. You do need to have certain privileges in order to change ownership within the system. So not everybody will see that option when they're in their file repository. Now, continuing right along, our next icon here is called Draft Data. I don't have any right now, but this would show if we have any models that are in the process of mapping data and assigning and uploading that data to the model. If that is the case, you would see an indicator here that you have some outstanding draft data, and you could jump right back into the mapping process from the file repository screen here. The next icon is just a simple refresh, which will refresh your file repository for any updates from anybody else. And the next one is Upload File. This will allow you to select a file from your local computer and upload it to SAC to be housed there. Most document types of files will be accepted, including Microsoft Office documents, text files, CSV files, PDFs, items like that. But not every file type is supported. For example, video files are not supported. And next we have our Show Columns icon, which is indicated by a little eyeball. This will allow us to choose what columns are displayed in our file repository. For example, I could turn off the Changed On column, and I could turn off the Changed By column. I can turn those back on by opening that up again and toggling those columns back on. It's as simple as that. And that brings us to our last icon, the filter icon. This allows me to only see certain types of objects as I'm sifting through my folder structure. If I'm only looking for stories, for example, I can filter on stories. And as I navigate through my folders, if I go to my models folder, for example, it will appear to be empty because I'm looking only for stories. If I go to my stories folder, I will see all of those stories. But if I change the filter here, instead of stories, if I'm looking for models, this folder, my stories folder, will now appear empty. I do want to advise that people pay attention to what they have filtered, because sometimes you might be looking for something and you will forget that you had applied a filter previously, and you'll think that you cannot find that object or that that object is missing. If that's the case, just double check your filters and make sure that they're cleared. And last but certainly not least, in the file repository toolbar, there is a search bar. I can search for the name of objects directly here in the search bar instead of having to sift through the folder structure itself. For example, if I type in the name of something that I know to be a story, I can see the results right here and jump right into that story instead of having, again, to sift through the different folders. One last quick tip is that SAC might remember what you had typed in here in your search bar, and you may need to clear that out the next time you hop into your file repository so that you're just looking at the folder structure itself.